The sudden departure of Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, from their sanctuary at Windsor remains one of the most quietly unsettling developments in recent royal history. Unlike the usual media tempests that surround the monarchy, there were no leaking court factions, no explosive interviews, and no public family rifts. This decision was driven by an eerie, visceral realization that strikes at the core of human security. It is the sort of revelation that makes any homeowner pause, look at their own floorboards in the dead of night, and wonder what lies beneath. The situation unfolded during a routine structural assessment at Adelaide Cottage. Nestled within the picturesque grounds of the Windsor estate, the home had been intentionally selected by the couple to offer their 3 young children a relatively grounded, unpretentious upbringing away from the museum-like grandeur of Kensington Palace. Historic properties require ongoing maintenance, and engineers were performing a standard evaluation of the cottage's foundation. However, within 17 minutes of descending into the lower masonry, the team unearthed a secret that altered everything. Subterranean passages, dating back centuries to the turmoil of the English Civil War, wound silently beneath the charming cottage. Over time, these tunnels had slipped entirely out of memory. They appeared in no modern architectural schematics, were omitted from property surveys, and had gone undetected by decades of high-tech security sweeps. While the existence of historical passages on ancient royal grounds is not entirely unheard of, what transformed this discovery from an architectural curiosity into an immediate security crisis was what lay waiting inside them. It was roughly 15 minutes past midnight on a crisp late November evening. William and Catherine had retired several hours earlier, and Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were sound asleep. Deep within the structural foundations, hidden thermal sensors embedded in the stone began detecting movement in a zone that should have been completely inert. William woke first, an instinctual response honed by years of military training. He was attuned to subtle environmental shifts, and the faint change in atmospheric pressure caused by personal protection officers quietly mobilizing in the lower hallways brought him instantly to full awareness. Catherine awakened moments later, propelled by a mother's natural intuition. Rather than calling out, they remained silent, aware through long experience in the public eye that in moments of potential danger, silence and observation yield crucial context faster than panicked questions. A quiet but firm knock echoed at their bedroom door. William moved swiftly, opening it to find Marcus Headley, their head of personal protection. Headley's expression immediately signaled the gravity of the situation. Flanked by 3 armed officers occupying tactical defensive positions down the corridor, Headley made it clear that this was no drill or false alarm. The structural engineers had not merely uncovered empty stone corridors. They had found clear evidence of recent, sustained human occupation. The subterranean spaces contained unrusted tools, fresh footprints left in soft dust, empty water bottles bearing recent retail dates, a clean folding chair, a thermal blanket, and most alarmingly, a collection of photographic surveillance. Spread across a temporary setup were recent, high-resolution photographs of the family going about their private routines, captured from angles indicating an intimate familiarity with their movements, security shifts, and daily schedules. Someone had been living directly beneath their living quarters while the family slept, conducting an unobserved, long-term surveillance operation. Before Headley could finish the briefing, Catherine was already moving toward the children's bedrooms. Composed and serene in public, her instincts as a mother took over completely. There was no hesitation or demand for further explanations. George, Charlotte, and Louis needed to be quietly awakened, dressed, and safely evacuated while law enforcement determined the extent of the breach. William watched his wife move efficiently from bed to bed, her soft voice keeping the children calm as she framed the middle-of-the-night relocation as an unexpected adventure. 11-year-old George already carried an intuitive understanding that his family's position entailed unusual dangers. 9-year-old Charlotte, sharp and observant, voiced the central question, "Are we safe here, Mommy?" Catherine's brief, almost imperceptible pause before offering reassurance was a moment William noted with heavy heart, the undeniable weight of their reality settling on them both. The evacuation executed with silent precision. William carried 6-year-old Louis, who was still heavy with sleep, down the main staircase while Catherine guided the older children. Security staff retrieved pre-packed emergency bags containing essential items, a standard protocol maintained for all senior royals that underscored the constant, underlying threat level under which they live. 3 armored vehicles waited in the driveway, engines idling, with egress routes already verified by the Central Command network. As they stepped out into the freezing November air, Catherine paused to look back at the cottage. What had been a cherished family home, chosen for its open gardens and cozy rooms, was now enveloped in cold darkness, its familiar comforting contours suddenly feeling hostile. William reached out, taking her hand as they boarded the vehicle. The motorcade pulled away at precisely 12:43 a.m., leaving behind a property that was instantly reclassified as an active crime scene, an archaeological site, and a major intelligence failure. By dawn, forensic tents had been erected across the lawns of Adelaide Cottage, marking various entry points into the underground network. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Wainwright, a specialist in high-profile historical property crimes with top-tier security clearance, was summoned to lead the site investigation. Using thermal imaging and ground-penetrating radar, her team discovered that the tunnel network was far more expansive than initially thought, stretching beyond Adelaide Cottage to connect with Windsor Castle itself, as well as nearby residences like Frogmore Cottage and Royal Lodge. For years, an unmapped subterranean network had bypassed every modern perimeter defense, camera array, and security checkpoint surrounding the royal estate. While the discovery of historical passages connecting the estate's properties posed a massive structural security headache, it was the specific chamber discovered directly beneath 6-year-old Prince Louis's bedroom that turned a dangerous vulnerability into a nightmare. Inside a small, makeshift subterranean camp, investigators uncovered meticulous logs and surveillance photographs detailing the family's daily life. The vantage points and notes revealed an alarming level of detail: exact school drop-off times, Catherine's morning jogging routes through the grounds, and precise windows when estate guard rotations created temporary lulls in exterior coverage. This was not casual curiosity. It was a disciplined, methodical tracking operation carried out by someone operating literally feet beneath their floorboards. From their temporary haven at Kensington Palace, William received hourly updates. The irony was bitter. They had deliberately left London to escape the fishbowl existence of the city and give their young family room to breathe, only to be forced back by a breach far more terrifying than any public intrusion. Catherine focused on maintaining a facade of normal life for the children, setting up school routines in their former apartment, though 11-year-old George could sense the tension. Spotting his eldest son staring quietly out a window over Kensington Gardens, William joined him for a soft, honest conversation, carefully balancing the truth of their situation without instilling unnecessary fear, striving to avoid the emotional distance of previous royal generations. Meanwhile, back at Windsor, the investigation deepened. Counterterrorism agents worked alongside Dr. Helena Ashworth, an expert from the Royal Collection Trust. Her knowledge of Tudor and Stuart architecture proved essential in deciphering how the subterranean passages had remained hidden. The network dated back to at least the mid-1600s, with evidence showing parts had been briefly accessed during World War II when Princesses Elizabeth and Margaret used Windsor's fortified grounds as shelter during the Blitz. Over the intervening decades, however, records of the tunnels had been misfiled, forgotten, or lost in the vast archives of the royal household. The critical question remained: who had found them and why? King Charles received a comprehensive briefing at Clarence House. Having weathered decades of security scares himself, the king recognized this incident as fundamentally different, a profound failure of the physical domain thought to be absolute. At his direction, MI5 was brought in to lead counterintelligence efforts. Digital forensics teams began analyzing the surveillance equipment and photographs left behind, extracting metadata and searching for a profile of the intruder. By the third day, the narrative took a darker turn. In the deeper recesses of the system, chambers so tight they required crawling on hands and knees. Investigators discovered older encampments dating back nearly 2 years. They found waterproof containers housing marked historical maps, handwritten journals, and cross-referenced research papers. Professor James Harrington, a historian specializing in secret royal architecture, examined the documents and discovered an unhealthy obsession with lost historical artifacts. The writer had become convinced that vast troves of royal treasures, allegedly hidden during the English Civil War to keep them out of parliamentary hands, were still buried beneath Windsor. Over time, the entries in the journals degraded from eccentric scholarly research into an unraveling mental state, shifting from historical obsession to a dark, personal fixating on the Wales family itself. The primary suspect was soon identified: Malcolm Hendricks, a 47-year-old former museum curator from Kent. Hendricks had been dismissed 3 years earlier for increasingly erratic behavior. Drawing on his genuine expertise in historical archives and architectural plans, he had tracked down references to the forgotten tunnels, acquired ground-penetrating radar equipment, and spent months living underground for stretches of 8 to 10 hours at a time. A raid on Hendricks's rented cottage 3 miles from Windsor revealed that he had fled in haste, having realized his underground lair was discovered. The evidence left behind painted a disturbing picture. Analysts from MI5 and psychological specialists determined that Hendricks had developed a severe parasocial obsession, believing the royal family was actively keeping historical truths from the public, and that he was somehow destined to uncover them. Alarmingly, his notes were not limited to Windsor. They included detailed surveys of Sandringham and Balmoral, suggesting his underground surveillance might have been intended to follow the family across their various private residences. A nationwide manhunt was launched, treating Hendricks as a high-level threat due to his deep knowledge of royal infrastructure and unpredictable mental state. As weeks passed, security teams at Adelaide Cottage worked tirelessly, sealing the secret entrances, installing advanced motion and seismic sensors, and setting up facial recognition networks across the estate. Yet, despite the technical remedies, the psychological damage was done. The knowledge that a stranger had spent years watching them from the dark beneath their feet had poisoned the sense of peace Adelaide Cottage once provided. William and Catherine were forced to confront a painful reality. No amount of technology could restore the feeling of home to a house whose sanctuary had been so utterly violated. The psychological toll of the prolonged investigation weighed heavily on the family as the cold rain of December set in over London. At Kensington Palace, the physical threat felt managed by thick stone walls and armed protection details, but the emotional sanctuary William and Catherine had fought so hard to build for their children remained deeply fractured. The youngest, Prince Louis, experienced frequent nightmares, his 6-year-old mind transforming the complex security breach into simple, frightening visions of monsters hiding under the floor. Princess Charlotte developed an intense hypervigilance, quietly packing their apartment to recheck door locks and window latches, a silent, heartbreaking habit that Catherine watched with suppressed grief. Prince George, increasingly aware of the reality of his lineage, grew unusually quiet and introspective, asking searching questions about protection details and perimeter zones that no 11-year-old should ever have to consider. Catherine found herself wrestling with an insidious sense of maternal guilt. Adelaide Cottage had been her choice as much as William's, a deliberate step away from the rigid, institutional atmosphere of traditional royal residences. They had wanted open lawns, muddy boots, and quiet evenings where their kids could play without feeling like museum exhibits on display. Now that intentional pursuit of normalcy felt almost naive, a well-meaning attempt to ignore the harsh realities of their public role that had inadvertently exposed their children to an obsessive predator. William shared that silent burden. His childhood had been defined by intense media exposure and strict security protocols, and he had vowed to forge a different path for his own children. He had wanted to offer them a balance between duty and freedom. The revelation that Malcolm Hendricks had spent months quietly recording their lives from below felt like a harsh, unforgiving judgment on those efforts. By mid-December, law enforcement and intelligence agencies made a crucial breakthrough in tracking Hendricks. Digital forensics teams monitoring online subcultures identified a network of obscure historical forums where Hendricks, using various pseudonyms, had posted fragmented updates about his subterranean work. The posts showed a man slipping deeper into delusion, viewing himself as a historic hero fighting against a royal cover-up. Using digital footprint analysis and tracking high-end surveillance equipment purchases, MI5 agents traced Hendricks to an isolated, disused boathouse along the River Thames near Staines. Armed tactical officers moved in under the cover of early morning darkness, apprehending Hendricks without violent resistance. Found surrounded by handwritten maps, photographic gear, and detailed logs of royal schedules, Hendricks appeared disoriented, a man utterly consumed by his own alternate reality. Yet, despite his arrest, the closure brought little relief to the Prince and Princess of Wales. The physical security upgrades at Adelaide Cottage had been completed with military precision. The hidden tunnels were filled with reinforced concrete and lined with seismic sensors capable of detecting the smallest vibrations. Advanced thermal cameras and artificial intelligence-driven monitoring systems covered every inch of the perimeter. Architecturally and practically, Adelaide Cottage was now as impenetrable as any bunker in the country. However, a home is built on belief, not concrete and sensors. When William and Catherine discussed returning to Windsor, the conversation was heavy with unsaid truths. The rooms might be newly fortified, but the memory of what had transpired beneath them remained fixed. Every creak of the floorboards at night, every shadow in the hallway, and every quiet moment would be filtered through the disturbing knowledge that someone had been sitting in the dark directly below, watching them live their private lives. A formal meeting was convened with King Charles and senior security advisors to determine the family's long-term housing arrangements. The official narrative released to the public would frame the move as a strategic realignment of official duties and estate management, avoiding granular details that might inspire copycat intrusions or compromise intelligence methods. But behind closed doors, the reality was stark. William and Catherine were choosing to permanently abandon Adelaide Cottage. They decided to make Kensington Palace their primary urban base, while evaluating other secure, established properties within the royal portfolio for their private family life, placing absolute safety and peace of mind above their previous desire for a modest, unfortified home. On Christmas Eve, after the children had finally fallen asleep, William and Catherine stood together at the large multi-paned windows of their Kensington apartment, looking out over the quiet expanse of Kensington Gardens shrouded in winter fog. The year was ending, not with the tranquil family retreat they had envisioned when they first moved to Windsor, but with a sober acceptance of the trade-offs their lives required. They spoke quietly of the months ahead, of helping the children regain their sense of security, and of the ongoing adjustments to their public duties. Neither mentioned returning to Adelaide Cottage. They both understood that some violations run too deep for repairs, and that once the sacred boundary of a home is broken, no amount of restoration can ever truly rebuild the peace that was lost in the dark.